A chilling scream pierces the opulent halls of Ravenwood Manor, where a snowstorm traps a cast of glamorous suspects with dark secrets. Lord Ashford lies dead, a crimson rose on his chest, a locked door hiding the killer's path. Why does the rose point to betrayal? Who wields the poison that killed again? Hercule Poirot, the world's greatest detective, unravels a web of blackmail, vengeance, and hidden passages, setting a cunning trap to catch a murderer. Will his clever tricks reveal the truth before the snow thaws, or will the killer strike again? Dive into a mystery where every motive masks a deadly lie. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitation. The rain fell in a soft, persistent drizzle over London, cloaking the city in a silvery mist that clung to the cobblestones and blurred the gaslights along Baker Street. Inside his impeccably tidy flat, Hercule Poirot sat by the fire, his small, precise hands folded over a letter that had arrived with the morning post. The envelope, cream-coloured and embossed with a curious crest raven clutching a rose had, piqued his curiosity the moment it slid through the letterbox. Now, as the clock on the mantelpiece ticked toward 8, Poirot's sharp green eyes scanned the words again, his moustache twitching with intrigue. The letter was no ordinary correspondence. Written in an elegant, looping script, it invited him to a gala at Ravenwood Manor, a secluded estate nestled in the frostbitten moors of Yorkshire. The host, Lord Reginald Ashford, was a name Poirot vaguely recalled from society columns, a man of wealth, eccentricity, and a penchant for collecting rare artifacts. But it was the letter's tone that stirred Poirot's little grey cells. It spoke of a game of wits, a challenge tailored to the detective's renowned intellect, promising an evening of revelations and riddles. The closing line, underlined with a flourish, read, "Only a mind such as yours can unravel what lies beneath the surface of Ravenwood." Poirot leaned back in his armchair, the firelight casting shadows across his oval face. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "a game, is it? But what is the prize, and what is the cost?" He had solved cases across continents, from the Orient Express to the Nile. But this invitation felt different, less a request than a summons, laced with a subtle dare. He tapped the letter against his knee, considering. The gala was set for the coming weekend, and the forecast promised snow. To decline would be to admit defeat before the game had begun. "Nan," he said aloud, his voice firm. Hercule Poirot does not shy from a challenge. By Friday evening, Poirot found himself aboard a rattling train bound for Yorkshire, the countryside blurring past in a mosaic of greys and greens. His trusty companion, Captain Hastings, had been unavailable, detained by a family matter, leaving Poirot to face this mystery alone. He adjusted his perfectly knotted tie, smoothed his patent leather shoes, and reviewed the guest list enclosed with the invitation. It was a curious assembly. Lady Eleanor Ashford, the host's glamorous and sharp-tongued widow; Victor Crane, a bullish businessman with rumoured ties to Ashford's enterprises; Clara Beaumont, Ashford's estranged sister, a recluse with a penchant for poetry; Dr. Helena Voss, a brilliant but enigmatic scientist; and a handful of others, including artists, minor nobles, and a journalist named Marcus Lyle, known for his scandalous exposes. Each name carried a whisper of motive, a shadow of intent. The train screeched to a halt at a lonely platform where a chauffeured Rolls-Royce awaited. The driver, a gaunt man with eyes like polished flint, introduced himself as Giles, the Manor's butler. "Lord Ashford is eager to meet you, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice clipped, betraying no emotion. The drive to Ravenwood was silent, the road winding through desolate moors where skeletal trees clawed at the sky. As the manor came into view, Poirot's breath caught. Ravenwood was a Gothic masterpiece, its turrets piercing the gathering dusk, its windows glowing like eyes. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and a faint mist curled around its base, as if the house itself exhaled secrets. Giles led Poirot through a grand oak door into a foyer adorned with tapestries and a chandelier that glittered like a frozen waterfall. The air carried the scent of beeswax and old money. A maid, young and nervous, took Poirot's coat and hat, her hands trembling as she avoided his gaze. "This way, sir," Giles said, guiding him to the ballroom, where the gala was already in full swing. The room was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal flutes clinked, silk gowns rustled, and a string quartet played a haunting waltz. Guests mingled beneath a frescoed ceiling depicting ravens in flight, their painted eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he entered. Lord Ashford stood at the centre of the room, a tall man with silver hair and a hawkish nose, his presence commanding, despite the lines of age etched into his face. He wore a velvet smoking jacket, a crimson rose pinned to his lapel match for the crest on the invitation. "Monsieur Poirot," he boomed, striding forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The great detective graces us at last. Welcome to Ravenwood." His handshake was firm, almost challenging, and Poirot noted the faint tremor in his fingers. "The pleasure is mine, Lord Ashford," Poirot replied, his accent polished, his gaze steady. "Your invitation was most provocative. I am curious to learn the nature of this game you propose." Ashford's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. "All in good time, my friend. Tonight we dine, we dance, and we observe. The game begins. When the clock strikes midnight," he gestured to the crowd, "allow me to introduce my guests. Each is a puzzle in themselves, but none so clever as you, I wager." Poirot's eyes swept the room, cataloguing faces. Lady Eleanor, radiant in emerald satin, held court near the fireplace, her laughter bright but her eyes cold, darting toward Ashford with something like disdain. Victor Crane, broad-shouldered and red-faced, was deep in conversation with a man Poirot recognized as Marcus Lyle, the journalist whose pen seemed poised to stab as much as write. Clara Beaumont stood apart, her dark dress blending with the shadows, a book of poetry clutched to her chest like a shield. Dr. Helena Voss, in a severe grey gown, hovered near a table laden with scientific instruments, her fingers tracing the edge of a glass beaker as if it held answers. Dinner was announced, and the guests moved to a dining hall where a mahogany table groaned under silver platters of roasted pheasant, glazed figs, and crystal decanters of claret. Poirot took his seat, positioned to observe. Ashford presided at the head, his charisma masking a tension Poirot could almost taste. Conversation flowed, but it was laced with barbs. Victor Crane boasted of a recent deal, his voice loud enough to drown the quartet, while Lady Eleanor countered, with a cutting remark about his vulgar ambition. Clara remained silent, her eyes fixed on her brother, her expression unreadable. Dr. Voss spoke little, but when she did, her words were precise, like a scalpel's edge, discussing rare plants with an intensity that drew Poirot's attention. As the dessert course arrived, poached pears, drizzled with honey a toast, was proposed. Ashford rose, glass in hand, his voice resonant. "Two secrets," he said, his eyes locking with Poirot's. "May they be uncovered, no matter the cost." The guests raised their glasses, but the air grew heavy, the clink of crystal sounding like a warning bell. Poirot sipped his wine, noting the way Ashford's hand lingered on the rose at his lapel, as if it were a talisman. The evening progressed with dancing, the ballroom alive with swirling couples. Poirot, never one for such frivolity, stood by a window, watching the snow begin to fall outside, soft and relentless. He was approached by Marcus Lyle, whose sharp features and sharper tongue betrayed his profession. "So Poirot," Lyle said, swirling his drink, "what brings the world's greatest detective to this nest of vipers? Ashford's up to something, isn't he?" Poirot smiled thinly. "Perhaps, Monsieur Lyle, it is not Lord Ashford who is up to something, but the guests themselves. Tell me, what do you seek to uncover here?" Lyle grinned, a predator's smile. "A story, there's always one in places like this: betrayal, greed, maybe even murder." His words hung in the air, prophetic and chilling. As midnight approached, Ashford called for silence. The quartet ceased, and the guests gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. "My friends," Ashford began, standing on a dais, "tonight is no ordinary gala. I have invited you here to play a game, a test of truth. Each of you holds a secret, and I know them all." His voice dropped, a theatrical whisper. "By dawn, one secret will be revealed, and it will change everything." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the flicker of fear in Clara's gaze, the tightening of Victor's jaw, the way Dr. Voss's hand clenched her glass. Before Ashford could continue, a piercing scream shattered the moment. It came from the West Wing, sharp and raw, cutting through the manor like a blade. The guests froze, then surged toward the sound, Poirot at their heels, his heart pounding with the thrill of the chase. The scream led to Ashford's study, a heavy oak door ajar. Giles, the butler, stood outside, his face ashen. "My lord," he stammered, pointing inside. Poirot pushed past, entering a room lined with books and lit by a single candelabrum. There, slumped in a leather chair, was Lord Ashford, his eyes wide and lifeless, a crimson rose identical to the one on his lapel placed on his chest. Blood pooled beneath him, a stark contrast to the pale rug, and a dagger glinted on the floor nearby. The guests crowded the doorway, gasping, some turning away. Lady Eleanor clutched her pearls, her face a mask of shock, though Poirot noted her dry eyes. Victor Crane swore under his breath, his fists clenched. Clara stood rigid, her poetry book now on the floor, pages splayed. Dr. Voss's expression was unreadable, her scientist's mind already analyzing. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands careful not to disturb the scene. The dagger was ornate, its hilt engraved with the same Ravenandro's crest. The wound was precise, a single thrust to the heart. "Murder," Poirot declared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "And one of you, Mies Amos, is the killer." He stood, his small frame commanding the room. "The snow falls heavily now. No one leaves Ravenwood until I have uncovered the truth. The game, it seems, has begun in earnest." He met each guest's eyes, his gaze piercing, promising answers. The chapter closed with Poirot's vow echoing in the silent study, the fire casting long shadows as the snow sealed the manor, trapping hunter and hunted alike. Chapter 2. The Puzzle of the Locked Door. The air in Ravenwood Manor's study was thick with the coppery temps of blood and the faint perfume of the crimson rose resting on Lord Ashford's lifeless chest. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his sharp eyes scanning the scene, absorbing every detail as the guests crowded the doorway, their whispers a nervous hum. The candelabram's flickering light cast eerie shadows across the oak-panelled walls, where shelves groaned under leather-bound tomes and peculiar artifacts, a jade scarab, a gilded astrolabe, a Venetian mask with hollow eyes, the dagger, its Ravenandro's hilt glinting, lay discarded on the rug, a silent accusation. But it was the door locked from the inside, its heavy bolt still in place, that intrigued Poirot most. A puzzle, he murmured, his moustache twitching. And Hercule Poirot, adoris, appuso. He turned to the guests, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and something less definable. Mies, Amos, he said, his voice calm but commanding. No one is to touch this room. We stand in the presence of murder, and the truth lies in the details. He gestured to Giles, the butler, whose pallor rivaled the snow piling outside. Monsieur Giles, you will ensure this door remains sealed until I return. Understood? Giles nodded, his flinty eyes darting to the body. Yes, Mr. Poirot. But how could anyone have done this? The door was locked when we heard the scream. Precisement, Poirot replied, his tone laced with intrigue. That is the question, is it not? He ushered the guests back to the ballroom where the string quartet's instruments lay abandoned, their notes replaced by the howling wind. The snowstorm had intensified, blanketing the moors in a white shroud, ensuring no one could flee or enter Ravenwood. The manor was a locked box, and Poirot intended to pry it open. He began with the crime scene, returning to the study alone, a small notebook in hand. The room was a study in contrasts, opulent yet austere, chaotic yet ordered. Ashford's desk was cluttered with papers, a crystal inkwell and a half-burned cigar, its ash scattered like grey snow. The rose, vibrant against Ashford's grey pallor, was no ordinary bloom. Its petals were unnaturally vivid, its stem thornless, suggesting cultivation rather than nature's whim. Poirot knelt, examining the dagger. The blade was clean save. For the blood at its tip, the strike surgical. A killer with precision, he noted, jotting in his notebook. But why the rose? A signature, perhaps. The locked door demanded his attention next. The bolt was sturdy, its mechanism unforced, and the key remained in the lock, turned inward. The windows were sealed, their latches rusted from disuse, and the chimney was too narrow for a child, let alone a murderer. Poirot's fingers traced the walls, tapping lightly. A faint hollow sound near a bookcase caught his ear. With a gentle push, a panel clicked open, revealing a narrow passage, its stone walls damp and cold. Mon Dieu, he whispered, peering into the darkness. Secret way, but to where? He chose not to explore it yet, preferring to gather more clues before venturing into the unknown. Instead, he summoned Giles for questioning in the library, a cavernous room where firelight danced on gilt-edged spines. The butler stood rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. Monsieur Giles, Poirot began, pacing slowly, you were the first to reach the study after the scream. Tell me, what did you see? Giles swallowed, his throat bobbing. I was in the hall, sir, preparing the midnight champagne as Lord Ashford requested. The scream came from the west wing, sharp, like a woman's. I ran to the study, found the door locked, and called for the master key. When I opened it, he faltered, his eyes distant. He was there, dead, just as you saw. And the scream, Poirot pressed, his gaze piercing. You were certain it was a woman? Giles hesitated. I I think so, sir. But it was so brief, I can't be sure. Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a wave. Very well, send in Lady Eleanor. As Giles departed, Poirot considered the butler's demeanour. His fear seemed genuine, but there was a guardedness, a hint of something unspoken. Everyone here hides something, Poirot mused, but what? Lady Eleanor entered, her emerald gown shimmering, her posture regal despite the hour. Her dark hair was swept up, revealing a neck adorned with a sapphire choker that caught the firelight. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice smooth but edged, this is a dreadful business. Reginald murdered. It's unthinkable. Yet, it has happened, Madame Poirot replied, gesturing to a chair. Tell me, when did you last see your husband alive? She sat, her movements deliberate. At dinner, during his toast, he was theatrical, as always, going on about secrets and games. Afterward, he said he had business to attend to and left for his study. I stayed in the ballroom, dancing with Mr. Lyle. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you heard nothing unusual, number? Scream. She shook her head, but her fingers tightened on her fan. Nothing. The music was loud, and the guests were lively. Her lips curved faintly, as if recalling a private jest. Poirot noted her composure, too perfect for a grieving widow. And your marriage, madame, was it as harmonious as your husband's gala suggested? Her smile vanished. Reginald was a difficult man, charming, but controlling. We had our disagreements, but murder. I loved him in my way. Her voice cracked, but her eyes remained dry. After she left, Poirot summoned Victor Crane, whose bullish frame filled the doorway. His ruddy face was flushed, whether from wine or guilt. Poirot couldn't yet tell. Look here, Poirot, Crane began, his voice booming. I didn't come to this blasted manor to be accused of murder. I was in the billiard room when that scream rang out, playing around with that journalist fellow. Lyle Poirot tilted his head. And Lord Ashford, did you speak with him tonight? Crane snorted. Briefly, at dinner. He was crowing about some new venture, trying to goad me. We've had our differences, business, you know, but I didn't kill him. Differences? Poirot asked, his tone mild but probing. Crane's jaw tightened. He undercut me on a deal last year. Cost me a fortune. But that's no reason to stick a dagger in a man's heart. Poirot dismissed him, his mind racing. Crane's temper was evident, but his alibi was verifiable. Next, he called for Clara Beaumont, Ashford's sister, whose pale face and dark eyes gave her the air of a ghost. She clutched her poetry book, her fingers ink-stained. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, I don't know why you wish to speak to me. I barely saw Reginald tonight. Where were you when the scream was heard? Poirot asked, watching her closely. In the conservatory, reading, she replied, her voice barely audible. I prefer solitude to revelry. Poirot leaned forward. And your brother? You were estranged, Nan. Clara's eyes flickered. We had a falling out, years ago. He disapproved of my choices, my life. But I didn't wish him dead. Her voice trembled, but her grip on the book tightened, as if anchoring her. Finally, Poirot spoke with Dr. Helena Voss, whose grey gown and severe bun made her seem more machine than woman. She stood stiffly, her hands clasped. Monsieur Poirot, I'm a scientist, not a murderer. I was in the drawing room examining Lord Ashford's collection of botanical prints when the scream occurred. Poirot raised an eyebrow, and the rose on his chest. It is unusual, is it not? You, a scientist of plants, must have thoughts. Voss's lips thinned. It's a hybrid, likely from a controlled environment, but I know nothing of its placement. There, as she left, Poirot returned to the study, his mind a whirl of contradictions. The locked door, the secret passage, the rose all pointed to a killer with intimate knowledge of Ravenwood. He sketched a rough map of the manor in his notebook, marking the study, the passage, and the likely exits. The passage's entrance was cleverly hidden, suggesting the killer knew the manor's secrets. But why lock the door, he mused, to delay discovery or to taunt? The chapter closed with Poirot standing by the study's window, the snow now a wall of white, sealing the manor tighter than the bolted door. He traced the passage's outline on his map, his eyes gleaming. The killer believes they have outwitted Hercule Poirot, he said softly, but they have only begun the game. The fire crackled, and the rose on Ashford's chest seemed to glow, a silent challenge to unravel its meaning before the snow thawed. Chapter 3. Shadows of the past. The snow continued its relentless assault on Ravenwood Manor, piling against the windows like a silent conspirator, sealing the guests within its stone walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, the fire's glow casting his shadow across a towering bookshelf. His notebook lay open on a mahogany table, its pages filled with neat, precise notes. The locked door, the secret passage, the crimson rose. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to weave it into truth. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford was no random act. It was personal, deliberate, and rooted in a past that lingered in the manor like dust in its corners. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the creak of the library door. Clara Beaumont, Ashford's estranged sister, entered, her dark dress blending with the shadows. Her poetry book was tucked under her arm, its edges worn from countless readings. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but steady, "you wished to see me again." "Oui, Mademoiselle Beaumont," Poirot replied, gesturing to a velvet-upholstered chair. "Please, sit. There are matters of the past we must discuss, for the past, it seems, has returned to haunt Ravenwood." Clara's eyes flickered, but she sat, her posture rigid. "The past is a heavy burden, but I don't see how it helps you now." Poirot tilted his head, his green eyes sharp. "On the contrary, the past is the key. Your estrangement from your brother, it was not a mere disagreement, was it? Tell me, what drove such a wedge between you?" Clara's fingers tightened on her book, her knuckles pale. "Reginald was controlling. He wanted to dictate my life, my choices. When I refused to marry the man he chose for me, he cut me off, called me a disgrace. I left Ravenwood and never looked back until this gala." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And yet you accepted his invitation. Why?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the fire. "Curiosity, perhaps, or hope. I thought, after all these years, he might wish to reconcile, but he was the same, arrogant, manipulative. His talk of secrets last night." She trailed off, her voice catching. Poirot leaned forward. "Secrets, mademoiselle? Did he speak of yours?" Clara's head snapped up, her eyes fierce. "I have no secrets worth killing for, Monsieur Poirot. Whatever Reginald knew, it died with him." Poirot let her words hang in the air, noting the defiance in her tone. He dismissed her gently, his mind already turning to the next piece of the puzzle. The library door had barely closed when he crossed to a side table, where a silver tray held a collection of Ashford's personal effects, retrieved from the study. Among them was a small, locked box, its surface etched with the Ravenandro's crest. Poirot's nimble fingers worked at the lock, but it resisted. A challenge within a challenge, he murmured, slipping the box into his pocket for later. His next inquiry led him to the conservatory, a glass-domed haven filled with exotic plants, their leaves glistening in the dim light of oil lamps. Dr. Helena Voss was there, her grey gown stark against the vibrant greens. She stood over a tray of specimens, her hands gloved, a magnifying glass poised over a cluster of tiny star-shaped flowers. Poirot cleared his throat, and she startled, nearly dropping the glass. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, recovering quickly, "you move like a cat. What brings you here?" "The pursuit of truth, Madame Voss," he replied, his eyes scanning. "The conservatory. This place, it is your domain, Nan. These plants, they are not mere decorations." Voss's lips quirked, a rare hint of pride. "Lord Ashford funded my research into rare botanicals. These specimens are part of my work hybridization, chemical properties, but I assure you, they have nothing to do with his death." Poirot stepped closer, noting a notebook tucked beneath her tray, its pages filled with diagrams and tight, precise handwriting, and the rose on Lord Ashford's chest. "A hybrid, you said. From this very conservatory, perhaps." Voss's expression tightened. "Possibly. It's a strain I developed crimson, thornless, a symbol of perfection, but anyone could have taken it. The conservatory is not locked." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And your notebook? May I see it?" She hesitated, then slid it toward him. "It's just research formulas, observations. Nothing sinister." Poirot flipped through the pages, his eyes catching on a sketch of the crimson rose, annotated, with chemical symbols he didn't recognize. "Fascinating," he said, closing the book but committing the image to memory. "You are a woman of secrets, Madame Voss, but I wonder are they all scientific?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "Ask your questions, Monsieur Poirot. I have nothing to hide." He smiled thinly, excusing himself to explore the manor further. The conservatory's humid air clung to him as he moved to the west wing, where a narrow staircase led to the upper floors. The scream that had heralded Ashford's death echoed in his mind, not its sound, but its implications. Giles had thought it a woman's, yet no one admitted to it. Poirot's steps were silent on the carpeted stairs, his senses alert. At the landing, he paused before a portrait of a younger Ashford, his arm around a woman who resembled Clara, though her face was softer, less guarded. A brass plaque read, "Reginald and Clara, 1895. The painting's eyes seemed to follow him, a silent accusation in a guest room. Poirot found Marcus Lyle, the journalist, scribbling furiously in a leather-bound journal. Lyle looked up, his sharp features alight with curiosity. Poirot, sniffing out clues already. "Care to share?" Poirot's smile was polite but guarded. "Monsieur Lyle, it is you who seeks to uncover stories, Nan. Tell me, what did you hope to find at Ravenwood?" Lyle leaned back, his pen tapping his lips. "Ashford was a goldmine of scandal-shady deals, broken promises. I came to see if his game would spill something juicy. Didn't expect murder, though," he grinned, but it faltered under Poirot's scrutiny. "And where were you when the scream was heard?" Poirot asked. "Dancing with Lady Eleanor." Lyle said smoothly, "She's a firecracker, that one. Kept me on my toes." Poirot nodded, filing away the consistency with Eleanor's account. He left Lyle to his scribbling, descending to the dining hall, where the remnants of last night's feast were being cleared by the nervous maid, Sophie. She flinched as Poirot approached, her hands fumbling a silver tray. "Mademoiselle Sophie," he said gently, "you are troubled. Did you know Lord Ashford well?" She shook her head, her eyes darting to the door. "Not well, sir. I've only been here a month." He was kind, but distant, always in his study. "And last night," Poirot pressed, "did you see anything unusual?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I saw someone near the west wing, just before the scream. A shadow. Moving fast. I couldn't tell who." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A shadow, you say? Mercy, mademoiselle, you have been most helpful." As evening fell, the guests gathered for a tense dinner, the grandeur of the previous night replaced by suspicion. Poirot orchestrated the seating, placing Clara beside Victor Crane, whose loud complaints about the damned inconvenience of the snow grated on everyone. Lady Eleanor sipped her wine, her gaze flicking to Poirot as if measuring him. Dr. Voss ate sparingly, her attention. On a pocket watch she checked repeatedly. Lyle, ever the observer, jotted notes between bites. Poirot rose, clinking his glass for attention. "Mies, Amos," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Tonight I have asked questions, and you have answered some truthfully, some less so, but I, Hercule Poirot, see more than you think." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Lord Ashford's death is tied to this manor, to its secrets, to its past. I invite you to share what you know now, or in private. The truth will not hide forever." A heavy silence followed, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Clara's fork clattered to her plate, her face pale. Victor muttered something about nonsense, while Eleanor's smile was razor-thin. Voss's watch clicked shut, her expression unreadable. After dinner, Poirot retired to his room, the locked box from Ashford's desk in hand. Using a hairpin from his toilette kit, he coaxed the lock open, revealing a torn photograph. It showed a younger Clara, her arm around a man whose face was obscured, the edges jagged as if ripped in anger. On the back, in Ashford's hand, was written, "She will never forgive me." Poirot's eyes narrowed, the photograph a key to Clara's pain and, perhaps, her motive. The chapter closed with Poirot at his window, the snow a relentless curtain beyond the glass. He tucked the photograph into his notebook, his mind racing. "The past is not dead," he whispered. "It lives in Ravenwood, and it has killed." The fire in his room flickered, casting the shadow of a raven on the wall, as Poirot vowed to unearth the secrets buried in the manor's heart. Chapter 4. The alibi game. The snow fell thicker now, a relentless shroud that turned Ravenwood Manor into a fortress of ice, its Gothic spires swallowed by the storm. Inside, the air was taut with suspicion, the guests' faces etched with unease. As they gathered in the ballroom, their shadows dancing in the chandelier's fractured light, Hercule Poirot stood at the room's centre, his small frame commanding, his green eyes gleaming like polished jade. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford hung over them like a spectre, and Poirot knew the key to unmasking the killer lay in dismantling their carefully constructed alibis. "The game of truth," he murmured to himself, "is a game of patience." He had spent the morning poring over his notes, the torn photograph of Clara and the mysterious man tucked safely in his pocket, the crimson rose, the secret passage. The locked door all pointed to a killer with intimate knowledge of Ravenwood's secrets. But alibis were the scaffolding of deception, and Poirot intended to test their strength. He clapped his hands, the sound sharp in the hushed room. "Mies Amos," he announced, "today we reconstruct the night of Lord Ashford's death. Each of you will recount your movements, and I, Hercule Poirot, will listen for the truth. It hides in the cracks." The guests exchanged wary glances. Lady Eleanor, her sapphire choker glinting, raised an eyebrow. "A theatrical exercise, Monsieur Poirot. Surely you don't suspect us all?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Madame, in a murder such as this, everyone is a suspect until proven otherwise. Shall we begin?" He started with Victor Crane, whose bullish demeanor seemed subdued, his ruddy face pale under the chandelier's glow. "I told you, Poirot," Crane growled, crossing his arms. "I was in the billiard room with Lyle when that scream rang out. We were playing around, discussing business. Nothing more." Poirot tilted his head, his expression mild. "And yet, Monsieur Crane, I found a cigar stub in the West Wing corridor near the study. It is of the same brand you smoked at dinner. Curious, Nan." Crane's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the floor. "I may have stepped out for a smoke earlier. Doesn't mean I was near the study when Ashford was killed." Poirot nodded, letting the inconsistency linger like a bad note. He turned to Marcus Lyle, the journalist, whose sharp grin belied his nervous fingers tapping his pen. "Monsieur Lyle, you confirm Monsieur Crane's alibi?" Lyle leaned back, his chair creaking. "Sure thing, Poirot. We were knocking balls around, talking about Ashford's latest venture. Didn't hear the scream till everyone else did." "And yet," Poirot said, pacing slowly, "you are a man who notices details, Nan. Did you see anyone near the West Wing that night?" Lyle's grin faltered. "It was a busy night, people coming and going. I didn't notice anything odd." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he moved on to Clara Beaumont, who sat apart, her poetry book open on her lap, though her eyes were fixed on the far wall. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, you were in the conservatory, reading, oui." Clara's voice was soft, almost lost in the room's vastness. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I find the conservatory peaceful. I heard the scream, but I was alone." Poirot studied her, noting the faint tremor in her hands. "And no one saw you there? No one passed by?" She shook her head, her dark eyes meeting his briefly before dropping. "No one." Dr. Helena Voss was next, her posture rigid, her grey gown as severe as her expression. "I was in the drawing room," she said, her voice clipped, "examining Lord Ashford's botanical prints, as I told you. I heard the scream and joined the others at the study." Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "And the rose, Madame Voss? Its presence on Lord Ashford's body, it is no coincidence, I think." Voss's lips thinned. "I've said it before, Monsieur Poirot. The rose could have come from the conservatory, but I didn't place it there. Lady Eleanor was the last to speak, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as glass. I was dancing with Mr. Lyle, then mingling with guests. I didn't leave the ballroom until the scream." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each response. The alibis were polished, almost too perfect, as if rehearsed. He clapped his hands again. "Mercy, Mies, Amos. Now, let us test these truths. We shall reenact the moments before the scream, precisely as they occurred." The guests murmured in protest, but Poirot was relentless, directing them like a stage manager. He positioned Crane and Lyle in the billiard room, Clara in the conservatory, Voss in the drawing room, and Eleanor in the ballroom, with the nervous maid, Sophie, instructed to retrace her steps, serving champagne. Poirot stood in the West Wing, corridor, stopwatch in hand, timing their movements against the scream's estimated moment 11:55. According to Giles, as the reenactment unfolded, Poirot moved silently, his patent leather shoes whispering on the carpet. In the billiard room, Crane's cue stick struck a ball with unnecessary force, while Lyle's eyes darted to the door, as if expecting an interruption. In the conservatory, Clara sat with her book, but her gaze was fixed on the glass dome, not the pages. Voss, in the drawing room, stood before a botanical print, but her fingers twitched, betraying unease. Eleanor glided through the ballroom, her movements graceful but her smile strained. Poirot paused at the west wing corridor, where the cigar stub had been found. He knelt, examining the floor, and noticed a faint scuff mark, as if a shoe had dragged against the wood. "Interesting," he murmured, sketching the mark in his notebook. He then moved to the study, its door still sealed, and re-examined the secret passage's entrance. The panel was seamless, its mechanism oiled, suggesting frequent use. The killer knew this passage, he said to himself, but did they use it to enter or to escape? As the reenactment concluded, Poirot gathered the guests in the dining hall, where a cold supper awaited, though few had an appetite. He stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. "Your alibis, they are consistent," he said, his tone deceptively mild. "But consistency is not truth. Monsieur Crane, your cigar places you near the study. Mademoiselle Beaumont, no one confirms your solitude. Madame Voss, your roses bloom in suspicion. And Madame Eleanor, your grace conceals calculation." The guests bristled, but Poirot raised a hand. "I do not accuse yet, but I observe, and I have found something." He produced a small vial from his pocket, retrieved from the study's desk during his morning inspection. It contained a clear liquid, its label faded but legible. "Toxin extract, H. Voss. Madame Voss, care to explain?" Voss's face remained impassive, though her eyes flickered. "It's a byproduct of my research, harmless in small doses, used for plant hybridization. Lord Ashford kept it in his study for my experiments." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And yet, a toxin near a murdered man is no coincidence. I have sent for a chemist in York to analyze it, though the snow delays their arrival." The dinner ended in uneasy silence, the guests dispersing to their rooms. Poirot lingered, his mind turning to the secret passage. Under cover of night, he slipped into the study, a lantern in hand, and entered the passage. It was narrow, its stone walls etched with faint carvings, roses, and cryptic runes. The passage wound downward, emerging in a small chamber beneath the manor, where a trap door led to the greenhouse. Poirot's breath caught as he stepped into the humid air, the crimson roses glowing under moonlight filtering through the glass. "The rose's cradle," he whispered, noting a workbench scattered with pruning tools and a jar of the same clear liquid from the vial. The chapter closed with Poirot standing among the roses, his lantern casting long shadows. He sketched the greenhouse's layout in his notebook, marking the passage's exit. "The killer walked this path," he said softly, "and left a trail of petals." The snow outside howled, but Poirot's resolve burned brighter. The greenhouse, a new piece in the puzzle, promising answers as sharp and dangerous as the dagger that killed Ashford. Chapter 5. The Crimson Clutha, greenhouse of Ravenwood Manor, glowed under a sliver of moonlight, its glass walls frosted by the relentless snowstorm that imprisoned the estate. Hercule Poirot stood among the crimson roses, their thornless petals, vibrant against the dim lantern light. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and something sharper, chemical, that prickled his senses. The secret passage from the study had led him here, to this verdant sanctum, and the discovery of the toxin vial in Ashford's desk had sharpened his focus on the roses themselves. A flower, he murmured, his mustache twitching, is not merely a flower when it rests on a dead man's chest. The killer had chosen the rose deliberately, and Poirot was determined to unearth its significance. He examined the workbench, cluttered with pruning shears, glass vials, and a jar of the same clear liquid he'd found in the study. A label, scrawled in Dr. Helena Voss's precise hand, read, fertilizer compound, hybrid strain 7. Poirot's gloved fingers lifted the jar, noting its weight and the faint residue on its rim. Fertilizer, or something more sinister? He wondered aloud, slipping a sample into a small envelope for later analysis. The roses, identical to the one on Ashford's body, grew in a neatly tended row, their crimson hue almost luminous. He plucked a single petal, its texture silky yet unnervingly perfect, and tucked it into his notebook beside his sketch of the greenhouse. The manor's clock tower chimed faintly, signaling the early hours of the morning. Poirot extinguished his lantern and slipped back through the passage, emerging in the study. The room was as he'd left it, Ashford's body now covered with a sheet at Poirot's insistence to preserve the scene. The dagger's Ravenandro's hilt glinted in the candlelight, a silent taunt. Poirot's eyes lingered on it, then moved to the desk, where a faint scratch mark caught his attention, a mark not present during his earlier inspection. "Someone has been here," he whispered, his heart quickening. The killer, perhaps. Returning to cover their tracks, he resolved to set a trap. At breakfast, he gathered the guests in the dining hall, where a meagre spread of toast and tea reflected the strain of the snowbound manor. The mood was grim, the guests' faces drawn from sleeplessness and suspicion. Poirot stood, his small stature belied by the authority in his voice. "Miss Armis," he began, "the investigation progresses. I have learned much about Lord Ashford's death, but there is more to uncover. I believe his diary containing his most private thoughts holds the key. It is missing, but I will find it." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Clara Beaumont's teacup trembled, spilling a drop onto her saucer. Victor Crane's scowl deepened, his fingers drumming the table. Lady Eleanor's smile was tight, her eyes flicking to Dr. Voss, who sat rigid, her hands folded as if in prayer. Marcus Lyle, the journalist, scribbled in his notebook, his pen moving faster than usual. Poirot watched them all, planting the seed of the missing diary of fiction designed to provoke. After breakfast, he sought out Sophie, the nervous maid, in the scullery, where she was polishing silver with shaking hands. "Mademoiselle Sophie," Poirot said gently, "you told me of a shadow near the west wing before the scream. Have you seen anything else, anything at all?" Sophie's eyes darted to the door, her voice a whisper. "Last night, sir, after everyone went to bed, I heard footsteps in the hall near the study. I thought it was you, investigating, but I saw someone, a figure, moving toward the library." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A figure, you say? Man or woman?" "I couldn't tell," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. "It was too dark, and I was frightened." "Mercy, mademoiselle," Poirot said, dismissing her. Her words confirmed his suspicion. Someone was searching, perhaps for the diary he'd invented. He moved to the library, where the fire was low, casting long shadows across the bookshelves. A quick search revealed a book out of Placé volume of Keats. its spine slightly askew. Inside, a folded letter slipped to the floor, its wax seal broken, bearing the Ravenandro's crest. The letter, in Ashford's hand, read, "Victor, your debt's unknown. Meet me at midnight, or the world will know too." Poirot's pulse quickened. "Blackmail," he murmured, "a motive as old as time." He tucked the letter into his pocket, determined to confront Crane later. First, he needed to explore the greenhouse further, suspecting its roses held more than beauty. He returned. Under daylight, the glass dome now a pale grey under the storm's weight. Dr. Voss was there, her gloved hands tending the roses with a reverence that bordered on obsession. "Madame Voss," Poirot said, stepping into the humid air, "these roses, they are your creation. Tell me, why would one be chosen to mark a murder?" Voss's hands stilled, her eyes meeting his with a scientist's clarity. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, the roses are accessible to anyone. They symbolize perfection, nothing more. Lord Ashford admired them, funded their development. Perhaps the killer chose one for dramatic effect." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Or perhaps to point to you, madame. Your toxin, your roses both, found with the body. A coincidence." Her jaw tightened. "I am a scientist, not a murderer. My work was for knowledge, not death." Poirot nodded, unconvinced, and turned to the workbench. He noticed a small ledger, its pages listing deliveries of rare chemicals. One marked urgent, atropine derivative, received the 10th of July. His knowledge of poisons was not vast, but he knew atropine was deadly in the right dose. "Interesting," he said, pocketing the ledger's page discreetly. "I shall keep this in mind." That evening, Poirot set his trap. He announced at dinner that he'd hidden the diary in the library, hinting it contained evidence of the killer's identity. He then stationed himself in a shadowed alcove near the library door, his lantern dimmed, his senses alert. Hours passed, the manor silent save for the storm's howl. Then, a soft creaker door opening. A figure slipped into the library, cloaked in a dark shawl, moving with purpose. Poirot followed, silent as a cat, and watched as the figure rifled through the shelves, pulling books with frantic hands. "Enough, Mademoiselle Sophie," Poirot said, stepping into the light. The maid gasped, dropping a book. In her hand was the letter Poirot had found earlier, now clutched like a lifeline. I wasn't stealing, sir," she stammered. "I was told to find it." "By whom?" Poirot demanded, his voice sharp. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I can't say, sir. They'll ruin me." Poirot softened, but his resolve was iron. "Mademoiselle, you are more than a maid, I think. Tell me the truth, and I will protect you." She hesitated, then whispered, "Miss Clara. She said the letter was dangerous, that it could destroy her. I owed her a debt, so I agreed to look." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mercy, Sophie, you have done well." He took the letter, noting its creases, as if read many times. The chapter closed with Poirot alone in the library, the letter in hand, the roses scent lingering in his memory. "Clara Beaumont," he said softly, "your secrets bloom like these flowers, but they will not hide forever." Outside, the snow fell, a silent partner in Poirot's pursuit, as the greenhouse's crimson clue promised to unravel the killer's mask. Chapter 6. The Mask of Motiver. The snowstorm raged on, wrapping Ravenwood Manor in a cocoon of white, its icy grip tightening around the secrets within. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, the letter Sophie had stolen clutched in his gloved hand. Its words, penned by Lord Ashford, implicated Victor Crane in a web of debts and blackmail. But the maid's confession pointed to Clara Beaumont's desperation. Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the firelight, his mind a whirl of connections. "The motive," he murmured. "It hides behind a mask, but Hercule Poirot will peel it away. The crimson rose, the secret passage, the toxin violor were pieces of a puzzle, but the human heart was the key. Today he would unmask the motives driving each guest, and the killer's face would begin to emerge." Poirot began with Sophie, summoning her to a quiet parlour where the morning light struggled through frosted windows. The maid's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Mademoiselle Sophie," Poirot said gently, "you have been brave to admit your role. Tell me, why did Mademoiselle Beaumont fear this letter so?" Sophie's voice trembled. She said it could ruin her. "Sir, years ago she borrowed money from Lord Ashford to escape a mistake. He held it over her, threatening to tell the world. She's proud, Miss Clara, but broken inside. I owed her for helping me when I had nowhere else to go." Poirot nodded, his expression soft but probing. "And this letter, did you read it?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I only took it because she begged me. She said it was in the library, hidden in a book." "Mercy, Sophie," Poirot said, dismissing her. The letter's contents suggested Crane's financial ruin, but Clara's involvement hinted at deeper ties. Poirot tucked the letter into his notebook, beside the torn photograph of Clara and the unknown man. A debt, a scandal, a family torn apart, he mused. But is it enough to kill? He sought out Victor Crane next, finding him in the billiard room, pacing like a caged bear. The man's broad shoulders were tense, his ruddy face flushed with more than drink. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot began, his voice calm, "this letter suggests Lord Ashford held power over you. Debts, perhaps, blackmail." Crane's eyes widened, then narrowed. "That's none of your business, Poirot. Ashford and I had our disputes, but I didn't kill him. I was in this room when it happened, as Lyle will tell you." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And yet, your cigar was found near the study, and this letter, it was hidden, yet someone knew to seek it. Why?" Crane slammed a fist on the billiard table, scattering balls. "Ashford was a snake. He lent me money when my business faltered, then used it to squeeze me. Said he'd ruin me if I didn't play his game. But I didn't stab him for it." Poirot noted the fury, the fear beneath it. "We shall see, monsieur," he said, leaving Crane to stew. His next stop was the conservatory, where Dr. Helena Voss was cataloguing her roses, her gloved hands moving with surgical precision. "Madame Voss," Poirot said, stepping into the humid air, "your roses are a marvel, but they are also a clue. And your toxin, perhaps it is more than fertilizer." Voss's eyes flicked to him, cool and assessing. "I've told you, monsieur. Poirot, my work is scientific. The toxin is for plant growth, not murder. Ashford funded my research because he believed in its potential, and if he threatened to withdraw that funding," Poirot asked, his tone mild but piercing Voss's. Hand paused over a rose. "He did, once. Said my results were too slow, but I didn't kill him for it. Science demands patience, not violence." Poirot nodded, unconvinced, and moved on to Lady Eleanor, whom he found in the drawing-room, arranging a vase of lilies with deliberate care. Her emerald gown was replaced by a sombre black dress, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "Madame," Poirot said, "your husband's death leaves you a wealthy widow, yet you seem composed. Eleanor's smile was thin. Reginald was a difficult man, Monsieur Poirot. Wealth doesn't erase years of control, of secrets, but I didn't kill him. I was in the ballroom, as I said, and his secrets, Poirot pressed. Did they involve you? Her fingers tightened on a lily stem, snapping it. He had many secrets. Some were mine, yes, but none worth a dagger. Poirot's day culminated in a dramatic parlour scene, a gathering he orchestrated with theatrical flair. The guests sat in a semicircle, their faces a mix of defiance and dread. Poirot stood before them, his small frame radiating authority. "Mies Amos," he said, "Lord Ashford's death is a tapestry of motives. Monsieur Crane, your debts made you vulnerable. Mademoiselle Beaumont, your past with your brother festers like a wound. Madame Voss, your science treads a dangerous line. Madame Eleanor, your freedom comes at a bloody price. And Monsieur Lyle, your pen seeks scandal, perhaps too eagerly." The room bristled. Crane's fists clenched. Clara's eyes dropped too. Her poetry book, Voss's lips thinned. Eleanor's smile froze, and Lyle's pen stilled. Poirot continued, his voice a velvet blade. "I have planted a seed, the diary, the letter, and already it bears fruit." He held up the letter, watching. Clara's face pale. Someone sought this, fearing its truth, but there is more to uncover. Clara's composure cracked, her voice sharp. "That letter is private, Monsieur Poirot. It has nothing to do with Reginald's death." Poirot's eyes locked on hers. "Then why, mademoiselle, did you send Sophie to steal it?" A gasp rippled through the room. Clara's hands trembled, but she said nothing, her silence louder than words. Poirot dismissed the guests, his trap set. That night he lingered in the parlour, a decoy book placed on a table, its cover marked Ashford's journal. He hid behind a heavy curtain, his breath slow, waiting. Hours passed, then a soft stepper figure in a hooded cloak, moving toward the book. Poirot stepped forward, but the figure fled, vanishing into the manor's maze of halls. The chapter closed with Poirot in his room, the decoy book in hand, its pages blank, but its purpose served. He opened his notebook, adding Clara's reaction and the cloaked figure's flight. "The mask slips," he whispered, the snow's howl outside echoing his resolve. "Each motive is a thread, and I, Hercule Poirot, will pull until the truth unravels." A coded message, glimpsed in Voss's notebook that morning, a series of numbers and letters, nagged at him, hinting at a meeting in the clock tower. The game was tightening, and Poirot was ready for its next move. Chapter 7. The Clock Tower Conspiracy. The snowstorm's relentless howl enveloped Ravenwood Manor, its icy tendrils sealing every exit, as if conspiring to keep the murderer's secrets locked within. Hercule Poirot stood in his room, the coded message from Dr. Helena Voss's notebook etched in his memory. 23 o'clock. CT, C+V. The numbers and letters, deciphered with his keen intellect, pointed to a clandestine meeting at 11 o'clock in the clock tower, involving Clara, Beaumont, and Dr. Voss. A conspiracy, Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching with anticipation. But for what purpose? The crimson rose, the secret passage, the stolen letteral were threads in a web of deceit, and tonight Poirot intended to catch the conspirators in their own snare. He slipped into the manor's shadowed corridors, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floors. The clock tower loomed at the manor's northern end, its iron staircase spiraling upward like a coiled serpent. Poirot carried a small lantern, its light dimmed to avoid detection, and a pocket watch to time his arrival. The manor was eerily quiet, the guests presumably in their rooms, though suspicion hung as heavy as the snow outside. The letter implicating Victor Crane's debts and Clara's desperate theft had stirred the pot, and Poirot's mention of a fictional diary had flushed out a cloaked figure. Now the clock tower promised answers. He reached the tower's base, where a narrow door creaked open to reveal a spiral staircase cloaked in shadow. The air was cold, carrying a faint metallic Thames, and the distant tick of the clock above was a heartbeat in the silence. Poirot ascended, his steps cautious, his senses alert. At the top, the clock's massive gears loomed, their slow grind echoing in the cavernous space. A single window let in slivers of moonlight, illuminating to figures in hushed conversation. Clara Beaumont, her dark dress blending with the shadows, and Dr. Voss, her grey gown stark against the iron machinery. Poirot extinguished his lantern and pressed himself against a gear, listening. Clara's voice was low, urgent. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Helena. He was never meant to die. Voss's reply was sharp, clinical. You knew the risks, Clara. He forced our hand, threatening to expose everything. We had no choice. Poirot's heart quaked. Expose everything. The words hinted at a shared secret, one worth killing for. He edged closer, but his foot brushed a loose bolt, sending it clattering. The women froze, and before Poirot could act, a massive gear above groaned, then plummeted, crashing inches from where he stood. Dust and sparks filled the air, and Poirot dove aside, his heart pounding. The women vanished into the shadows, there, footsteps fading down the staircase. Monsieur Poirot gasped, brushing dust from his coat. The gear's fall was no accident. Someone had tampered with the mechanism. He examined the machinery, noting a loosened pin, its edges freshly scored. Sabotage, he whispered, sketching the scene in his notebook. The near miss was a warning, but it only steeled his resolve. He descended the tower, determined to confront Voss and Clara. But first, he searched the chamber for clues. Tucked behind a gear, he found a blood-stained glove, its leather monogrammed with an Lady Eleanor's initial. Another thread. He murmured, slipping it into his pocket. At breakfast, the dining hall was a cauldron of tension. The guests' faces were drawn, their eyes darting to Poirot as he entered. He chose not to reveal the glove yet, instead focusing on Voss. Madame Voss, he said, his voice cutting through the clatter of cutlery. Last night I observed something curious in the clock tower. A meeting, perhaps. Voss's fork paused, her expression unreadable. I was in my room, Monsieur Poirot. The storm kept me awake, but I didn't venture out. And you, Mademoiselle Beaumont. Poirot turned to Clara, whose hands trembled as she poured tea. I was reading, Clara stammered, her eyes avoiding his. In the conservatory, Poirot's smile was thin, curious, for I heard voices in the tower discussing a plan gone awry, and then a gear fell most inconveniently. He let the words hang, watching Voss's jaw tighten and Clara's teacup rattle. Victor Crane snorted, breaking the silence. What's this nonsense, Poirot? You're chasing ghosts now. Poirot's eyes flicked to him. Not ghosts, Monsieur Crane, but motives. And yours, with your debts to Lord Ashford, remain compelling. Crane's face reddened, but he said nothing. Lady Eleanor, seated at the table's head, sipped her coffee, her composure unshaken. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice smooth, you seem determined to unsettle us all. Have you found anything concrete, or is this merely theatre? Poirot met her gaze, his fingers brushing the glove in his pocket. Concrete, madame. I have found much. A glove, perhaps, with a monogram that raises questions. Eleanor's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flickered. A glove, how quaint. Many of us wear them in this drafty manner. The meal ended, and Poirot sought out the butler, Giles, in the pantry, where he was inventorying supplies. Monsieur Giles, Poirot said, the clock tower, has it been maintained recently? Giles frowned, his flinty eyes narrowing. Not for months, sir. The groundskeeper was meant to inspect it, but the snow delayed him. And who has access? Poirot pressed. Only the staff, sir, and Lord Ashford, the keys kept in his study. Poirot nodded, dismissing him. The sabotaged gear suggested someone with mechanical knowledge, and Voss's scientific precision came to mind. He returned to the conservatory, where Voss was examining a rose, her movements deliberate. Madame Voss, he said, your notebooks. Code led me to the clock tower. A dangerous place for a meeting, Nan. Voss's eyes met his, unflinching. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. My notebook is for research plant hybrids, not conspiracies. And yet, Poirot said, producing the page he'd taken, these numbers and letters suggest otherwise. A meeting with Mademoiselle Beaumont, perhaps to discuss Lord Ashford's threats. Voss's composure cracked, her voice low. Ashford funded my work, but he demanded results I couldn't give unethical experiments, dangerous compounds. I refused, and he threatened to cut me off, but I didn't kill him. Poirot studied her, unconvinced. And Clara, what binds you to her? Voss hesitated, then said, she understood my work. We shared a goal to protect what we'd built here. Poirot let her words linger, his mind racing. The glove pointed to Eleanor, the code to Voss, and Clara, the letter to Crane. Each motive was a mask, but the truth was close. The chapter closed with Poirot in the clock tower, alone, the gears ticking like a countdown. He held the blood-stained glove, its monogram a silent accusation. The killer plays a dangerous game, he whispered, but Hercule Poirot plays better. Outside, the snow fell, a relentless curtain, as the tower's shadow loomed over. Ravenwood, promising revelations as sharp as the dagger that ended Ashford's life. Chapter 8. The web of lies. The snowstorm's fury had not abated, its relentless flakes piling against Ravenwood Manor's windows, transforming the estate into a fortress of secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the clock tower, the blood-stained glove with Lady Eleanor's monogram clutched in his gloved hand. The near-fatal fall of the gear, the coded message in Dr. Voss's notebook, and Clara Beaumont's desperate theft of the blackmail letter wove a tangled web. But Poirot's little grey cells were alight with purpose. The murder of Lord Reginald Ashford was a puzzle of motives and masks, and now a new thread had emerged, a second death, one that would tighten the noose around the killer's neck. Poirot began the day by confronting Lady Eleanor in the drawing-room, where she sat embroidering a delicate handkerchief, her black morning dress a stark contrast to her poised demeanour. Madame Eleanor, he said, producing the glove. This was found in the clock tower, stained with blood. Its monogram suggests it is yours. Care to explain? Elena's needle paused, her eyes meeting his with a cool defiance. Monsieur Poirot, gloves are easily misplaced. That one was stolen from my room days ago. Surely you don't think I'd be so careless as to leave evidence behind? Poirot's moustache twitched. Stolen, you say? Convenient Nan. And yet, the clock tower is a curious place for a lady of your stature to lose such a thing. Her smile was razor-thin. I've never set foot in that dusty tower. Perhaps someone wishes to cast suspicion on me. Poirot nodded, pocketing the glove. Perhaps, madame. But the truth, it has a way of revealing itself. He left her, composure unshaken, but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. His next move was to re-examine Dr. Voss's notebook, tucked safely in his room. The coded message 23 o'clock, CT, C+V head led him to the tower, but other pages hinted at more. He deciphered a new sequence, Formula 7, lethal in concentration. His heart quickened. The toxin vial from Ashford's desk, labelled in Voss's hand, was no mere fertilizer. He needed confirmation. He sought out the manor's cellar, a damp labyrinth beneath the kitchens where supplies were stored. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and mould, and casks of wine lined the stone walls. Poirot's lantern cast long shadows as he searched for anything out of place. In a shadowed corner, behind a stack of crates, he found a crumpled heaper body. It was Giles, the butler, his flinty eyes wide and lifeless, a faint froth at his lips. A vial, identical to the one in the study, lay shattered beside him, its contents staining the stone floor. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, kneeling to examine the scene. The froth suggested poison, likely the same toxin used on Ashford. Giles's hand clutched a scrap of paper, its edges singed with the words, "She knows too much." Poirot's mind raced. The butler had been a witness, perhaps to the clock tower meeting or the killer's movements. His death was no accident, it was silencing. Poirot summoned the guests to the dining hall, where the air was thick with dread. The news of Giles's death sent a shockwave through the room. Clara Beaumont's face paled, her poetry book slipping to the floor. Victor Crane swore, his fists clenched. Dr. Voss's hands twitched, her pocket watch clicking shut. Lady Ellen composure held, but her eyes darted to the door. Marcus Lyle, the journalist, scribbled furiously, his grin replaced by a grim intensity. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "A second murder has occurred. Giles, the butler, lies dead in the cellar, poisoned by the same toxin that killed Lord Ashford." The killer grows bold, but careless. He held up the singed paper. "This note suggests a secret known, a threat silenced. Who among you feared Giles's knowledge?" The room erupted in protests. Crane bellowed, "This is madness, Poirot. You're accusing us all." Clara's voice trembled. "I barely spoke to the man." Voss remained silent, her eyes fixed on the table. Elinor's laugh was brittle. "Surely, Monsieur Poirot, you don't think a woman like me would skulk in cellars?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "I accuse no one yet, but I observe. Madame Voss, your toxin is now linked to 2 deaths. Explain." Voss's voice was steady, but her fingers betrayed her, twisting a ring on her hand. "I've said it before, Monsieur Poirot. The toxin is for my research. Someone must have taken it from the conservatory." "And yet," Poirot said, producing the notebook page, "your notes speak of a lethal formula. A coincidence, perhaps." Voss's eyes narrowed. "My work is complex. You misinterpret my notes." Poirot let her words hang, turning to the group. "Tonight, we remain vigilant. The killer is among us, and their web of lies is fraying." He dismissed them, but kept Crane back. "Monsieur Crane, the letter I found suggests Ashford blackmailed you. Did Giles know of this?" Crane's face reddened. Giles was a nosy bastard, always eavesdropping. But I didn't kill him, more Ashford. Poirot nodded, unconvinced, and moved to the cellar to secure the scene. He found Sophie there, weeping, her hands wringing a cloth. "Monsieur Poirot," she sobbed, "Giles was kind to me. Who would do this?" "Someone desperate, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "Did Giles ever speak of secrets he overheard?" Sophie hesitated, then whispered, "He mentioned a quarrel, Lord Ashford and a woman, in the study, days before the gala. He wouldn't say who." Poirot's eyes gleamed messy. "Sophie, the quarrel could involve Clara, Eleanor, or Vossor, someone else entirely." He returned to his room, piecing together the clues: the glove, the toxin, the letter, the note. The killer was weaving a web, but Poirot was unraveling it, thread by thread. That evening, he orchestrated Kentucky Fried Chicken, gathered the guests in the library, a strategic move to keep them contained. "Mes amis," he said, "Shandy, no one leaves Ravenwood until I have answers. The snow, the isolation, it's a fortress now, but I will break its walls." The guests shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between one another. Clara clutched her book, her face pale. "You're locking us in here, Poirot." Poirot's voice was firm, his gaze steady. "Oui, madame. But I have questions. The glove, the toxin, the letter all point to a conspiracy. I will not rest until the truth is known." The room fell silent, the fire's crackle the only sound. Crane's voice boomed. "What are you playing at, Poirot? Locking us in?" Poirot smiled thinly. "A test, Monsieur Crane, to see who breaks first." The chapter closed with Poirot locking the library door, the guests confined to their seats, the air heavy with suspicion. "The killer is here," he said softly, "and I, Hercule Poirot, will find them. But for now, we stay together." The firelight flickered, casting shadows on the walls, as Poirot's words echoed in the tense silence, the web of lies tightening around Ravenwood's secrets. Chapter 9. The trap is sprung. The snowstorm's relentless grip on Ravenwood Manor tightened, its icy veil sealing the estate in a silent conspiracy. Inside the library, where Hercule Poirot had locked the guests, the air crackled with tension. The fire's glow casting jagged shadows across the faces of the suspects. The murders of Lord Reginald Ashford and Giles, the butler, hung over the room like a guillotine, their weight amplified by the blood-stained glove, the toxin vial, and the cryptic note, "She knows too much." Poirot stood before the group, his small frame radiating authority, his green eyes piercing the masks each guest wore. Tonight, he would spring his final trap, forcing the killer to reveal themselves in a moment of desperation. Poirot had spent the day piecing together the web of clues, the secret passage linking the study to the greenhouse, the crimson rose, the blackmail letter implicating Victor Crane, and the coded message in Dr. Helena Voss's notebook hinting at a conspiracy with Clara Beaumont. The glove with Lady Eleanor's monogram and the poisoned butler suggested a killer growing reckless. But Poirot's mention of a fictional diary and now a forged will had stirred the pot. "The killer," he murmured to himself, "is a spider spinning lies, but Hercule Poirot will cut the threads." He had orchestrated this gathering in the ballroom, its grandeur a stark contrast to the grim mood. The chandelier glittered above a polished floor, and a long table held a decanter of brandy, its amber glow a temptation Poirot had deliberately placed. The guests sat in a tense semicircle, Clara, her poetry book clutched like a talisman, Victor Crane, his fists clenched, Lady Eleanor, her black mourning dress offset by a single sapphire pin. Dr. Voss, her hands folded, her pocket watch silent. And Marcus Lyle, his journalist's pen poised, though his grin was gone. Mise et Miss Poirot began, his voice a velvet blade. 2 men are dead, and the truth lies among you. I have uncovered much. A passage from the study to the greenhouse. A toxin crafted by Madame Voss. A letter of blackmail against Monsieur Crane. A glove belonging to Madame Eleanor, and a note suggesting a secret known. But now I have found something new. He paused, producing a folded document from his pocket, its edges deliberately aged. A will hidden in Lord Ashford's safe, naming an unexpected heir. It changes everything. The room stirred, eyes widening. Clara's breath hitched. Victor's scowl deepened. Eleanor's fingers tightened on her glass. Voss's gaze sharpened, and Lyle leaned forward, his pen scratching. Poirot watched them all, his trap set. The will was a forgery, crafted to provoke, but its effect was immediate. This will, he continued, names Mademoiselle Beaumont as sole heir, cutting out Madame Eleanor and others. Curious, Nan. Clara's face drained of colour. That's impossible, she whispered. Reginald despised me. Laugh was sharp. A forgery? Surely, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald would never favour Clara over me. Poirot's moustache twitched. We shall see. But first, let us consider the passage. It connects every guest's room to the study, meaning any of you could have entered, killed, and escaped. The rose, the toxin, the glove point to a plan, but whose he paced, his steps deliberate, his voice rising. Monsieur Crane, your debts gave you reason to hate Ashford. Madame Eleanor, your freedom as a widow is motive enough. Madame Voss, your science was threatened by Ashford's demands. And Mademoiselle Beaumont, your past with your brother festers like a wound. Monsieur Lyle, your pen seeks scandal, perhaps at any cost. The accusations landed like blows, each guest bristling. Poirot raised the forged will. This document, it threatens someone here. Who among you feared its revelation? Clara stood, her voice trembling but fierce. Enough, Monsieur Poirot. I can't bear this. She clutched her book, tears in her eyes. Yes, I hated Reginald. He ruined my life, threatened to expose my son, born out of wedlock. I took the letter to protect myself, but I didn't. Kill him. The room froze, her confession a thunderclap. Poirot's eyes gleamed, but he pressed on. And the toxin, mademoiselle, the rose, the glove. Clara's voice broke. I worked with Helena. She gave me the poison, said it would only make him ill, to scare him. But someone used it to kill him and Giles. Voss leaped to her feet, her composure shattered. Lies, Clara. I gave you the toxin for research, not murder. You begged me to help, said Ashford would destroy us both. Poirot clapped his hands, silencing them. Mercy, madame, the trap is sprung. You, Mademoiselle Beaumont, poisoned Lord Ashford to protect your secret. Madame Voss, you supplied the means, driven by fear for your work. The rose was your signature, a flourish of guilt. Victor Crane roared, this is absurd. What about the glove? Eleanor's no saint. Eleanor's eyes flashed. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, my glove was stolen. I had no part in this. Poirot nodded, his gaze steady. The glove, I believe, was a distraction, placed to mislead. But the toxin, the passage, the rose, these point to Clara and Helena. Giles died because he overheard your plan, Nan. Clara sobbed, collapsing into her chair. I didn't mean for him to die, only to stop him. Voss's voice was cold. You used me, Clara. I thought we were protecting our futures. Poirot turned to the group. The police will arrive when the snow clears. Until then, Mademoiselle Beaumont and Madame Voss will remain under watch. He signalled to the remaining staff, who stood ready to escort them. The chapter closed with Poirot in the ballroom, alone, the forged will in hand. The confessions had come, but a nagging doubt lingered: the glove, the note, the precision of the murders. The web is torn, he whispered, but one thread remains. The snow outside howled, and the chandelier's light flickered, casting a raven's shadow on the wall as Poirot's mind turned to the final piece of the puzzle. His trap sprung, but the game not yet won. Chapter 10. The final bow. The snowstorm that had held Ravenwood Manor captive began to wane, its fierce howl softening to a whisper as dawn broke over the moors. Inside, the air was heavy with the aftermath of Clara Beaumont and Dr. Helena Voss's confessions, their guilt in Lord Reginald Ashford's murder laid bare in the ballroom's tense confrontation. Yet Hercule Poirot, standing alone in the manor's grand foyer, felt a flicker of unease. The crimson rose, the secret passage, the toxin. The blood-stained Glovel had woven a tapestry of motive and deceit, but one detail nagged at his little grey cells: the torn photograph from Ashford's desk. Its inscription, "She will never forgive me," and the face of the unknown man beside a younger Clara. The puzzle was nearly complete, but Poirot sensed a final piece, a truth that would bring the case to a close with the elegance it deserved. He gathered the remaining guests in the morning room, a cosy space with tall windows revealing the thawing snow, a promise of the police's imminent arrival. The fire crackled, casting warmth across the faces of Lady Eleanor, Victor Crane, and Marcus Lyle, their expressions a mix of relief and lingering suspicion. Clara and Dr. Voss sat apart, under the watchful eye of the manor's remaining staff, their hands bound loosely, their faces drawn. Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding, his green eyes sharp as he held the photograph, its edges jagged, its secrets poised to unravel. "Mise amis," he began, his voice a blend of authority and quiet triumph. "The murders of Lord Ashford and Giles, the butler, have been solved, thanks to the confessions of Mademoiselle Beaumont and Madame Voss. But Hercule Poirot does not rest until every thread is tied. There remains one question. Why did Mademoiselle Beaumont act with such desperation, and what drove Madame Voss to aid her? The answer lies here." He held up the photograph, its image catching the firelight. Clara's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. Poirot's moustache twitched. "In Lord Ashford's desk, locked away, a relic of a past he could not escape. It shows you, mademoiselle, with a man your lover, perhaps. And on the back, his words, 'She will never forgive me.' Who was he, and why did Ashford keep this?" Clara's voice trembled, her defiance crumbling. "My son's father, Thomas," Reginald disapproved, "called him beneath our family. When I refused to abandon him, Reginald ruined him, spread lies, drove him to ruin. Thomas died, broken, and I bore our child in secret. Reginald threatened to expose my son's illegitimacy, to strip him of any future. I couldn't let him." Poirot nodded, his gaze softening but unrelenting. "And so you turned to Madame Voss, whose work Ashford also threatened." Together, you planned to poison him, not to kill. You claim, but to frighten. Yet the dose was lethal, and Giles, who overheard your scheme, paid the price. Voss's voice was cold, her scientist's composure fraying. I gave her the toxin, yes, but only because Ashford demanded I create a weaponer, poison for his own ends. I refused, and he threatened to destroy my research. Clara promised we'd only make him ill to force his silence. Poirot turned to the others, his voice rising. The glove, the note, these were distractions, planted to confuse. But the rose, the toxin, the passage, they pointed to you. My trap, the forged will, the diary flushed out your panic, your guilt. You, Mademoiselle Beaumont, acted from a mother's love, twisted by vengeance. Madame Voss, your science became your snare. Victor Crane shifted, his voice gruff. What about the rest of us, Poirot? You've hounded us all. Poirot's eyes flicked to him. Monsieur Crane, your debts gave you motive, but your temper is too blunt for this crime's precision. Madame Eleanor, your glove was stolen, as you said, to cast suspicion. Monsieur Lyle, your pen sought scandal, but you lacked the access to the passage and toxin. Eleanor's smile was faint, almost relieved. So, I'm cleared then. Poirot inclined his head. We, madame, though your secrets remain your own. Lyle's pen scratched, his voice dry. Quite a story, Poirot. You've outdone yourself. Poirot ignored the quip, turning back to Clara. The photograph, Mademoiselle, it was the key. Ashford's guilt over Thomas's ruin drove him to keep it, a reminder of his cruelty. Your fear of its exposure drove you to murder. Clara sobbed, her poetry book falling open to a page marked with a pressed rose, its crimson faded but unmistakable. I only wanted to protect my son, she whispered. Poirot's voice softened, but his resolve was iron, and in doing so, you destroyed lives. The law will judge you, but Hercule Poirot has uncovered the truth. As the guests dispersed, the sound of sleigh bells echoed outside the police, braving the thawed paths. Poirot oversaw Clara and Voss's handover, their confessions recorded, their fates sealed. The manor felt lighter, its shadows retreating as sunlight pierced the windows. Poirot stood in the foyer, his suitcase packed, his hat and coat immaculate. Lady Eleanor approached, her sapphire pin catching the light. Monsieur Poirot, she said, you've saved us from ourselves. Thank you. Poirot bowed slightly. It is my duty, madame, to restore order where chaos reigns. He boarded a sleigh to the train station, the moors stretching endlessly around him, the snow softening to reveal patches of green. In his pocket, the photograph rested, a final testament to a family torn apart. The heart, he murmured, it is the most dangerous weapon. The sleigh glided forward, carrying Poirot back to London, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The case closed with a satisfying bow. The chapter and the story ended with Ravenwood fading into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its ghosts at rest. Poirot's clever trick is lies about diaries, and wills had unmasked the truth, proving once again that no killer could outwit the little Belgian detective.